I'm extremely happy to be speaking to Zev Feldman today. For all of you who don't know, Zev Feldman is an internationally recognized independent record producer and the co-president of Resonant Records in Los Angeles. He's also a consulting producer of archival and historical recordings for Blue Note Records, and I believe he also works with Elemental Records from time to time. And over the past few years, he has done an incredible amount of record detective work, including 3 Bill Evans records, including Evans in England, the From the Black Forest recording, which I forgot the exact name, and most recently, I believe Some Other Time, and the upcoming Bill Evans Live at Ronnie Scott's for Record Store Day, along with the Live at Ronnie Scott's record from Bill Evans on Record Store Day. Zev was also involved in perhaps the most highly anticipated release of these 4, Sonny Rollins, and Holland, with Rud Jacobs and Han Bennett, which is an incredible explosive record. Monty Alexander, Love You Madly, Live at Bubba's, and the George Coleman Quintet in Baltimore. All of these are just, amazing finds. He was also involved in the Art Blakey Just Coolin', the Nat King Cole, many Wes Montgomery titles. One of the earlier ones that I was aware of that Zev was involved in was the Thad Jones Mel Lewis Orchestra from the Village Vanguard. Just on and on and on. Were you also involved with the recent reissue of the Black Jazz titles?
I was. I actually worked with my good friend Gordon Anderson over at Real Gone Music, and I helped them with the launch. So I think we did about 6 or so titles together for the series. Yeah, that was a big thrill.
You're I can't think of anyone who has gone to so many lengths and come up with such great products so consistently. Is there a general, how does this happen? Or is it at this point people reach out to you, or how does this work?
Well, it's really interesting, Ken. It's been working in a variety of different ways. I like to think that as I've learned from George Clavin, as he says, sometimes the energies of the universe work their magic on their own. And it's really been exciting. I find my leads in a variety of different sources, from families that are calling with tapes, and maybe a lawyer. I get a call from an archive, or I get a tip from a musician. It comes from a variety of different sources. And a lot of it, I have to be completely honest, is oftentimes sleuthing on my own, reaching out to families of musicians who I'm just a really enormous fan of. I'm so blessed, really fortunate beyond belief that I get to do something for my job that I absolutely love. I'm so grateful for that opportunity. And I like to tell people, I leap out of bed every day in the morning with just the promise of the new day. And did I hear back from this person? Did those sound files show up so I can hear this and vet this through yet? And it's so exciting. But there have been a lot of trust and a lot of people. It's been working out this way. And I just what email or phone call I get today talking about something, about a find or something. So it happens a variety of different ways, and I'm just really glad.
Do you feel like part of this is 10 years ago, 15 years ago, even if you had found these recordings, they wouldn't be presented to the public because the sound quality just wasn't there? But it seems now, like post-Cedar, post of all the work Mosaic did, people such as yourself are able to, remaster tapes and get such great sound quality out of them, even though it does vary from release to release. Do you think that's part of it? The success of these releases?
I think there has definitely been advancements in technology and the fidelity side that have allowed us to make improvements. And there's all sorts of software. Still, I think that a lot of your viewers out there are going to recognize when you have the original analog tapes to work with, the potential is so much greater. And there are instances where we definitely do have to process some things to make them repairable, so that they can be listened to. Things that happen in recordings from different eras, but having the analog source is really a key stepping stone in the process. If you're lucky to have that, a tape could disintegrate, and there might be one source that's captured. Maybe it's on a DAT tape. That was, for instance, how I believe the Echoes of Indiana Avenue tapes came about, that project for Resonance Records back in 2010. But there have been advancements, and I think at the same time, though, we're just continuing to find great music, and it's given us opportunities. I think back to some of the best examples of this, for instance, of the Bill Evans album you spoke of called Some Other Time, the lost album from the Black Forest. We had the original session reels, and there wasn't a whole lot that needed to be done there. Hans-Georg Brunner-Schwier had done this engineering work with his team. And then, I think back to Eric Dolphy. We put out this recording Musical Prophet a couple years ago, and we actually had the original tape reels that belonged to Eric. So when you have that, you're able to accomplish more. But in terms of the fidelity, the importance of the music is there. And I understand that there's definitely, this is a very sensitive matter for a lot of the audiophiles out there who support this music. And we just try to make our best efforts possible to have a balance. We want to have the best listening experience and provide the best fidelity. But I think, to answer your question about Resonance, George Claben and I have really felt that Resonance is an audiophile label because we believe in great sound, and we strive for that, and it's just a part of our mantra.
But you definitely appeal to far more than just an audiophile market. I know that people in my group, by and large, jazz vinyl lovers, are not audiophiles, but they're rapacious for these records when they come out. On our record store day, there's all these different ways they try to find the records. Of course, people, we have them at Jazz Record Center, and they're really, really popular. Tell me, what was the story, since you mentioned that the first major Bill Evans release, From the Black Forest? Now, I had heard that part of the reason that hadn't been released earlier was because of his manager, Helen Keane, didn't want to release it at some point. Correct me if I'm wrong, or elucidate that for me a little more.
Well, the understanding that I had, and greatly in part because of research that was done by Aidan Levy in an article, the cover story that he did for Jazz Times, he had stumbled upon the fact that there had been actually a major falling out between Hans-Georg Brunner-Schwier and Helen Keane. When they recorded the album, Bill was under an exclusive recording contract to Verve Records. MGM, I believe, was the parent company at that time in '68. So, Hans-Georg Brunner-Schwier basically recorded that album as a souvenir. It wasn't later that they were able to make that album Symbiosis and do an official release. So that was part of it. I also understand, according to the folklore, if you will, that I believe on another project, maybe it was Symbiosis, that there had been a mix that had been done by Helen that had been maybe even with Klaus Ogerman. I got to look back at that. They got discarded, and HGBS decided to use his mix. And I understand that was something that really sent her over that she wasn't very happy about that. But again, that's a lot of speculation. But these tapes sat with the family. And I think when you listen to yourself, it's a major revelation. I want to say also that working with the estate of Bill Evans has been very exciting. Believe it or not, this album right here, Live at Ronnie Scott's, is actually our 5th production, excluding a compilation that we did last year on Bill. The first album that I did, and getting a chance to know the Evans estate, most notably his son, Evan Evans, who has been so supportive, was an album that came from my boss, George Claben. In 1968, Helen Keane called my boss, George Claben, one day up on the phone. George was a jazz DJ and one of the very first to program jazz at WKCR FM in New York at Columbia University. And George had a Crown 2-track tape recorder and an Ampex mixing board console. And he would schlep this around to different venues and made recordings. And Helen Keane knew that he had this gear. And she invited him down, I believe it was the fall of '68, to say, listen, I've got this new trio, this drummer, Marty Morell. Now, this must have been right on the heels of DeJohnette leaving the band. They play, I believe, a month at the Village Gate, which, by the way, Bill Evans played at the Village Gate all the time. And you know what? It's so interesting that we have these albums. People associate him from the Village Vanguard, but these recordings from Top of the Gate, the upstairs room, George recorded. He got the call. Helen said, hey, you want to come down here? I'll tell you what, George had an agreement with the artist that he could record the concerts, keep a copy for himself, play it on his program one time, and the artist would get a copy of the tape too. So George did that. Anyways, all those years and years later roll by. Here I come by in 2009. I start working for George, and he says to me one day, hey, Zev, do you want to, by the way, the show from Top of the Gate was with Eddie Gomez again and Marty Morell.
That was the first Resonance release?
That was the first archival release. We had already done a Scott LaFaro project called Pieces of Jade. We had released Echoes of Indiana Avenue within this window. And then the second release was George's tapes. He said to me one day, hey, do you want to hear my Bill Evans tapes? I said, sure. And this became, again, the album Live at Art Delugoff's Top of the Gate. It came out in 2012, originally as a 45 RPM 3 LP set, which we've sold out of since. Now we have this 2-disc. But anyways, that was the first one. And I got to know the family, and I got to know Eddie Gomez a little bit and Marty Morell. And I should tell you, I'm a huge Bill Evans fan. I've been listening to him since my late teens. And Eddie Gomez and Morell also, interestingly enough. I love Jack DeJohnette. I love Paul Motian. But I have to tell you something. There's something really that's a connection with Bill's music. And George and I have had this bond. So anyways, flash forward. Here we are, 2020. And we're putting out these tapes from Ronnie Scott's. And I couldn't be more thrilled to bring this release. I don't know if I should tell you a little bit more about it. Stop me.
I want to ask you about each one of these specific releases in a second, but I'm curious, were you saying that when Evans recorded what became the record from Black Forest, he also recorded the Symbiosis album at the same time?
No, they didn't. But there was something that happened in the working relationship that I think caused Hans-Georg Bruno-Schwer and Helen Keane to stop talking. So basically, any hopes of those recordings being released got shelved. And I believe Joaquin Ernest Barents, the gentleman who actually helped arrange for this session, I think as late as the late 70s, early 80s, they tried revisiting, and it just never happened. And then all those years later, I was at a Jazz Ahead conference, which is this trade conference for their people in the jazz business, distributors, media members, artists, booking people. I was there in Germany, in Bremen, Germany. And I had the good fortune of meeting one of the sons of MPS Records, a guy named Matthias Bruno-Schwer. And I have to tell you, I love MPS. I'm an enormous fan. I remember I saw the movie Jazzin' in the Black Forest when it came out, and I love that label. So when I met a family representative, oh man, I was just gushing and talking to them. And I remember telling the son, Matthias, I said, so I have a question. I asked this of a lot of people. So do you have any unissued recordings? And he's like, can you keep a secret? Okay. And he gives me the look over each shoulder, and he looks me dead in the eye and he says, we have a studio recording of Bill Evans Trio from 1968. And I think I almost passed out or something at that point, like Tom and Jerry cartoons, the eyes go like out of my head. Right. What are you talking about? He takes me out to the car, and we listened to some of this music in his station wagon. He played for me some of this music in the car, and I was taken by it. And I called George Claiborne immediately. And this was really like one of those moments where you're in the right place. There was a reason why George sent me all the way around the world to attend this conference, is to meet these kind of people. So it started a conversation, and I want to say that was the springtime. And by October, November of that year, I had flown back to Germany, this time to Hamburg, where I met the son, Andreas, who we signed the contract with. And I want to say within a year and a half later, that had come out. And that album, Some Other Time, it was extraordinary. I actually have right here the Downbeat Critics Poll Album Award for Historical Album of the Year. It was a juggernaut. It was something really exciting to be a part of. But I think one of the great things that happened as a result it gave my boss the confidence to keep us on the course, allow us keep doing our thing. Let's keep trying to find and unearth this music.
Did and not to harp on this, but was Symbiosis also recorded at the MPS studios?
I believe that it was. If not,
Okay.
it may have been at a different. I'd have to confirm which studio. But of course, I like that album a lot. I've been listening to that one for a long time. But that's another one with MPS. Yeah.
Did is that studio still in existence?
It is. It's in Villingen, Germany. I believe it's near the campus, and I say campus because Saba, it was right where Saba Records and where the Saba Radio Factory was.
Wow.
I actually took the train 8 hours from Bremen. I took the journey to Villingen deep into the Black Forest those years ago to visit. And I had a chance to go into the studio. I think it's the Bosendorfer that maybe Friedrich Gulda picked out that's there. I'd have to verify some of those details because I know some people like to make sure they know all the facts, but I believe that was the story. And then what was also just an unbelievable kick for me, I got to meet Mrs. Bruno Schwer at the house, and I got to see the living room where all those house parties were for when Oscar, those recordings that became exclusively for my friends, those were these house concerts that took place. And I believe it was a White Steinway. And I had a chance to meet the family. I'm really lucky. There's so many wonderful parts of this job, meeting people, the sleuthing. But if you're you got to be into this because this is what I live for. So for me, it's like, oh my God, where's the popcorn? This is amazing how this is unfolding. And this has really been for the last 10 years or so now, working for George, the sorts of excitement that I have. I just can't bottle it up and explain to someone. You have to be going through this journey yourself. But it's been so exciting and having all the support from people around the world. And I love the fact that we're also able to do something to celebrate Bill Evans's legacy. And we've done a great job of that, I think, creating more awareness to him over the years. And I couldn't be more happy about that. I hope he's looking down and smiling.
Now, I assume the Evans are the best selling of all the Resonance releases, because you've done so many for one thing.
They have been. He's definitely has an international appeal. I also like to, it's about the music, but I also like to, we were talking before, you mentioned Mosaic. I've got a lot of influences in the archival production world. Michael Kaskuna and Charlie Laurie are two guys that had a company that greatly inspired me. I have here, let's move can you see all that?
Sure.
Right there?
Those Mosaic sets, right.
My Mosaic sets.
Wow.
And I have my whole wall, my Blue Net, my Japanese stuff too. Let me adjust the camera here. But I love this stuff. Michael Lang at Verve, when I had a chance of working at Polygram in the 90s, it was amazing to see the creativity coming out of there and working with a designer like Hollis King, guys like Richard Seidel on the producer side, my friend Cheryl Pavelski, Joel Dorn, another guy I admire. I'm not the first to tackle this area.
32 Jazz, right.
Clear. A lot of it's just really been, it's just personal interest, being a fan. And so anyways, I think though, it's really about having reading. George says to me, Zev, it's like we're making books with music. So you get all this reading material that comes along. I really, for me, it's about an opportunity of really elevating the art of record making if we have an opportunity of doing that. I want to try to build something that's so great. I wanted to, when we did the first Wes Montgomery, Echoes of Indiana Avenue, Michael Kaskuna told me, he was very kind, and he paid me one great compliment saying that he knew very few people that would have gone to the distance, I think is what he said, of what we did to work on that. And I take that approach with every project. Who are the voices? Who has something to say about this music? And really, it's almost like investigative music journalism that goes along with it, finding images. For me, like listening to records my whole entire life, it is almost, it's this ability to be able to transport someone to a different time and place, a different dimension. But I'm just I want the people out there who are buying these projects to have a great time. I want them to know that there's going to be a full story to tell, and the music's going to be great, and something to walk away with, some knowledge. And it's so hard these days. People have a lot of things that they can spend their money on. So if they want to buy a release from Resonance or Blue Note or Reel to Reel or Real Gone or Elemental or Verve, I'm so lucky. I'm working with a lot of wonderful people these days.
You're working with all those labels?
I am at the moment. And I'm just lucky. I just want it to keep going. It's been wonderful also, I should say, in the Jazz Vinyl Lovers group for me to get a chance to, hey, in an evening sometime, burn through a few albums and share what I'm listening to. And I feel like there's this camaraderie between the fellow record fans out there too, that it's allowed me to connect with a lot of people, make a lot of friends. So I'm grateful to you for that.
Sure.
Ken.
Well, you're very down to earth. You're just like one of the guys in our group, and it was so nice of you to share your wisdom, and you're approachable to people. And I'm sure, like you get a lot of private messages because you're in the group now. It's hard to deal low sometimes, but you're very gracious to do that and to do this interview with me.
Sure.
So before you went to work for Resonance, you were sort of working at all these different labels, I guess, in different capacities, kind of learning the ropes. But am I to take it in the back of your mind, this is what you wanted to do?
Yeah, I really wanted to work in A&R for the longest time. I think it was also very intimidating. I came up in distribution doing sales and marketing. I started as an intern. Then I got a job working in the mailroom. Then they allowed me to hang posters and create displays in record stores. Then I did marketing. When I was 25, I was a sales manager very briefly for Rhino Records. And then I took a step back and went back to my old hometown and left New York, and Universal Music Group gave me the opportunity to become a salesman and really kind of perfect some of my interpersonal communication skills. That is a big part of what that is.
You're from New York originally?
My grandparents lived in Astoria when I was growing up. I'm from the Washington, D.C. area. I grew up in Rockville, Maryland. Area, Gaithersburg, North Potomac, a bunch of different names for it if you ask certain people.
Right.
But I'm from the East Coast originally, and I was doing that job at Universal representing all the jazz and classical music labels from basically 1999 to 2005. And then Concord Music Group recruited me to come to LA, where I did basically catalog management. I was the national director of catalog sales and retail marketing. So working back in the day when we would have Tower Records or HMV or Borders, or to be able to choose the titles that go into the sales and sit with some of the A&R people. But despite all that, there is this, hey, you stay in your lane. You work in sales and marketing, and then for a larger company, for the majors. It's constructed that way. There is a way things get done. There is a system. And I'm not saying it's like this everywhere, but my experience was, my job was selling and marketing the albums, making sure that the public was aware of them. It wasn't doing content acquisition, which is what a lot of this has evolved into. And that's the best part, is it's just been from personal passion. George,
that's funny. So you consider you consider yourself an A&R man. I hadn't thought of that.
Yeah. Well, a catalog A&R, archival A&R. You can call me a record man too. That sounds very cool. But I love making records and going on the road and talking about them and getting people turned on. I want people to feel what I feel when we take on these releases. I got to tell you, if I wasn't passionate, I had plenty of days in my career working with projects, especially early on, with stuff that I wasn't always necessarily personally a big fan of, but there was a lot of great stuff that I did enjoy too. And this job allows me to really gravitate. I tell people, someone comes to me, hey, would you like to do something? Well, I got to be passionate about it. I want to be excited. I want to be able to jump on top of the mountain and beat my chest and say, you got to hear this record. And that, it's passion,
Well, I think that comes through all these recordings and the titles you choose. I mean, like when I first heard about Sonny Rollins with Han Bennett, and the record lives up to the billing. I think this is one of Sonny Rollins' great records to compare to the Blue Note stuff, to compare to the Prestige stuff. It's almost like he's on the bridge with a trio because he's just blowing, and it's so on fire. And the George Coleman I haven't listened to yet, but that's something he really uncovered. And then to do something on Monty Alexander, talk about somebody who deserves a higher profile, such a beautiful player. And I looked at the little video of that on your Instagram page. I mean, it's like a perfect storm. You learning all your knowledge, the ability to clean up tapes, the vinyl resurgence, you all doing vinyl. It's just everything seems to have met at the same time. I'm curious, like some of the titles, like the first one from the Black Forest, it's super high fidelity. Some are not so much. Some of the Wes Montgomery titles, the fidelity's okay. And the Bill Evans record has parts where it sounds a little distorted. So what's your rule of thumb as to what you will and won't release as far as the sonics go?
Well, I think the music has to be really great. It has to be important. Otherwise, we always have to really, I think, measure, is this going to be contributing in a positive way or not to an artist's legacy? I don't like including music that's not good. George Claiborne shares this. Just because you have recordings from an artist doesn't mean it's worthy to come out. You really have to have a discerning ear. You have to be looking out for that artist's legacy. There's a lot of Bill Evans stuff that's come through my ears and gone, and we put on the side, decided not to pursue.
So there are things you've turned down. That's good to know.
Oh, absolutely. Every day. I mean, this is what makes its way through. The recordings from Ronnie Scott's are like the Holy Grail. And yeah, there's distortion in a couple of parts. I'm not going to lie, but these tapes have a backstory, because when we put out Some Other Time, oh my God, if I had a nickel for every phone call, email, text message that I got, private message, hey, people were aware, the Bill Evans fans were wide aware that he had played for not a week, but 4 weeks at Ronnie Scott's and in London. And it was like, where are those recordings? And when we did when we started off doing the Lost album from the Black Forest, Jack and I started talking, and I said, I'm getting these requests. He says, I have a tape of that. Really? Whoa. And he made a copy of it and sent it to me. It sounded like I was listening to the trio through a sock. Wasn't worthy releasing, so we put it away. And then something happened interesting back in, I want to say towards the end of 2000, sometime 2018. Stephen Reich, he's the attorney that introduced me to the Hans-Georg Brunner-Schwer's family to do that deal. He also works with Jack DeJohnette. And I got a phone call from Stephen. He's like, listen, I want to reconnect you with Jack. He's got some tapes in his archives, and I think it'd be really good for you to go through them with him and see if there's anything there. Well, we came along those same tapes for Bill Evans, except something happened this time. We put it on the machine and realized we weren't listening to it right way. It was a multi-track tape. So we didn't get a right dub. It wasn't right. And then we listened to it. I remember I was in Jack's basement at his home in upstate New York. And I was like, oh my gosh, there it is. So there was actually a bunch of things there were some tracks that we excluded.
Are you speaking to this new release, the Live at Ronnie Scott?
Yeah, I'm talking about Live at Ronnie Scott, sorry.
So that came from Jack DeJohnette's basement, essentially?
Yeah, that came from Jack's archive. Jack made the recordings himself with a hip recorder that he had like in between the piano and the drums and the bass, and it just picked up everything. So he recorded these. So we negotiated a deal with Jack and his wife, Lydia. And I have to say their godson, Matthew Garrison, was along as well and helped us in this process. And it's exciting, and here we are with this another release, our 5th on Resonance. And what's also exciting is that when we first started, there was one album with this trio, Live at Montreux with Eddie Gomez and DeJohnette. And then we unissued the Lost album from the Black Forest. And then also, don't forget, we had from 68, like a day or so before after, I have to look at the timeline, recording from Hilversum from Vara Studio 5. And now you have Ronnie Scott's, another 4 albums. There was originally one with this trio, now there are 4. And I just am really grateful to Evan Evans and the Bill Evans estate for allowing us to do this. And I'm also grateful to Jack and, of course, Eddie Gomez as well. Anyways, it's been exciting.